Hey, if you are a high achieving woman who is considering making the leap to entrepreneurship, I want you to know this. You are smart, you're accomplished, you have the title, the salary, the reputation, and honestly, a resume that most people would kill for. And yet, maybe there's a quiet voice underneath all of that for you that keeps saying, this isn't it. Maybe it shows up on Sunday nights when the dread settles in. Maybe it's in the middle of a meeting where you are performing your best version of trying to be engaged and thinking this feels so hollow. Maybe it's the moment you miss something with your kids, a school event, an award ceremony, a sporting event, and you smile through it and you tell yourself it's fine, but something in you knows it's not. And if that's you, then this video was made for you. I'm Lindsay Williams, life and leadership coach, founder of Elevate 365 Coaching, and the author of The Life You're Allowed to Want. And I spent years exactly where you are right now. And today I want to talk about what's actually happening, why it's so hard to move, and what the path forward actually looks like. Let me start by painting you a picture. You've spent the better part of 2 decades building something impressive. Maybe you are a director, a VP, an executive, or a senior leader in your field. You're the person people come to when things get hard. You're the one that holds it all together. But at some point, that work stopped feeling like a calling and started to feel like a cage. Maybe your company changed, maybe your leadership shifted, maybe the politics got really heavy. Or maybe, and this is the one nobody talks about, maybe you changed. Maybe you grew in a direction that your role just couldn't hold anymore. And if that happened to you, you are now living this strange double life, where on the outside, you are a high performer, but on the inside, you are someone who is quietly Googling how to start a business at 11 p.m., making spreadsheets about what it would cost to leave, saving screenshots of other people's business launches, and wondering if you could actually do something like that yourself. If you have an idea, maybe it's a coaching business, a consulting business, some sort of service based business built on the expertise you've spent decades developing, that means something. Maybe you just know you want something of your own, and that idea feels equally parts thrilling and terrifying. And because of that, you stay. You tell yourself you need more clarity first. You tell yourself you will figure it out later. You wait for a sign that is never going to come. And that's what I want you to understand. That waiting place, that in between place, it has a name. I call it the decision gap. And it's the space between everything you've already built and created in your life and who you are becoming. And that in between place where you know something needs to change, but you haven't made the move yet, it can feel enormous. Like you are standing on one side of a canyon, sensing that there is something amazing on the other side, but not being able to see it clearly enough to take the next step. What keeps women in the decision gap isn't laziness. It isn't lack of ambition. It isn't lack of skills. It is almost always one of a few very specific things. The first is identity. You've been the executive or the director or the manager for so long that stepping away from that identity feels like a loss, even when it also feels like a prison sentence. And the question underneath the surface is, who am I without that title? Okay, the second thing that gets in the way is permission. You've spent so long being responsible for everyone else's priorities that you've somewhere along the way stopped believing that you're allowed to want something for yourself. And that business you're dreaming about, some part of you deep down believes you're selfish to go after it. Because after all, life looks pretty good, by societal standards. And the third thing that gets in the way is clarity. If you don't have a clear enough picture of what the business would actually look like, of what you'd offer, who you'd serve, and how it could generate real income. And without that picture, the risk feels impossible to justify. And underneath all of those, it's fear, financial risk, reputation, the vulnerability of being seen in a new way, the fear of starting all over and getting it wrong. So you spin in the decision gap, you gather more information, you make more lists, more spreadsheets, you almost decide, and then you pull back. And that pattern repeats itself and repeats itself and repeats itself. And I know that because I did exactly that for years. I was working in an executive role doing meaningful work. My life looked great on paper, but I had hit a point where I felt deeply misaligned with what I was doing every day. And I kept pushing through it. And I told myself I just needed a new challenge or a change of scenery or a little more time. But the truth was, what had once felt like a calling to me, what had once inspired me and gave me passion, no longer held room for who I was becoming because the role hadn't changed. I had. I was missing moments with my kids that I couldn't get back. I was pouring my best energy into work while my own life sat waiting. And I felt this pull towards something more, something that was mine, something where I could use everything I've learned to help other women navigate exactly what I was navigating. But I spun in that decision gap for years before I finally made the move. Years of almost decision, years of waiting for a clarity that never fully arrived until I took action. And when I finally did make the leap and start building, it was messy. It took longer than I expected, and I made mistakes I could have avoided. And what I learned from that experience is that the path from corporate to entrepreneurship isn't just a business problem, it's actually an identity problem first. And most women try to skip that part, and that's exactly why they stay stuck. So, what does it actually look like to move through the decision gap, this in between space, and come out on the other side? In my experience, both personally and professionally, there are 5 distinct phases most women move through on this journey. The first is what I call the pressure point. And this is where you get honest about what's actually driving the desire to leave, to do something different. It's not the surface story, but the real one. What specifically is no longer working for you? What does staying cost you? Getting clear on this is what separates a passing frustration from a real signal worth acting on. The second phase is the identity shift. And this is where the real work lies. And it is the one that most people skip entirely, which is why they stay stuck. Because before you can build a business that is truly aligned with who you are, you have to do the work of figuring out who that actually is, who you actually are outside of the title and the role. And this is not about constructing a new identity. It's about peeling back the layers and uncovering the identity that was always there underneath the performing, underneath the pressure, underneath all of the false narratives of what you are expected to be, how you are expected to show up. The identity shift is a falling away, not a reinvention. In the third phase, and I want to pause here because I say phases, but these are not linear. You're going to move back and forth between these, and there's going to be multiple things that are happening at the same time during this journey. But the third phase is the clarity moment. And that is when it becomes possible for you to give yourself permission. Okay. And a lot of times this happens in conjunction with the identity shift. And the identity shift will continue on past the clarity moment. But the clarity moment is where you get specific. What is the business you want to create really? Who do you serve? What problem do you solve? How does that generate income? Real strategic clarity, not just a vision. Okay. And that happens when we get your nervous system aligned. That happens when we explore the pressure point, when we get real clear on who you have been being, who you have been showing up as, and who you are becoming. And again, we are not blowing up your life here. We are looking at peeling back the layers of who you are at the core, what you are meant to be doing at the core. And that's when you will get that clarity. But it comes from speaking it out loud. A lot of times you're having those conversations with yourself already in the car, in the shower, late at night when the house is quiet, but you haven't said the words out loud. The clarity moment comes when you give yourself permission to say the words out loud. The fourth phase is the grounded decision. And so this is where you actually make the call, but you're not making the call from a place of fear or impulse. But at this point, you are making the call from a place of being grounded, values aligned, with a real plan underneath it, so that it is a decision that sticks. And the fifth phase is the strategic path forward. This is a personalized plan, not a generic framework, not a course, but adapted to you, your situation, your specifics, an actual roadmap built around your life, your specific business, your specific goals. And I want you to take away from this that this leap to entrepreneurship, it doesn't happen in one big dramatic moment. It's a process. And when you move through that process intentionally and you do the work, building with clarity, making a grounded decision, backing it with real strategy, that leap becomes a lot less terrifying. It becomes for the first time something that may actually feel possible to you. So if this resonated with you, if you recognize yourself somewhere in the description of the decision gap, I want you to know you're not behind, you're not broken. You're just in the middle of something that requires more than willpower, more than skill, more than intellect to move through. And the work I do with women navigating this transition is called the Grounded Pivot. It's a 12-week one-on-one coaching program built around these exact 5 phases. So if that's something you're curious about, whether it's the right fit for where you are, there's a link below where you can connect with me. No pressure conversation where we look at where you are and where you actually need to be to move forward. And if you're not quite there yet, that's okay. Subscribe. I put out content every week for women navigating these exact crossroads. And I will see you in the next one.